Let's talk about motivation. And you know from reading the book that no one is motivated all the time. Doesn't matter if it's you or me or some athlete that we're watching on TV, an elite performer. We go through periods where we just don't feel motivated, where we just don't feel like doing something. It's very common, and one of the key attributes and things that outperformers do well is they strategically use different things to be able to create motivation. Whether it's a song that they listen to, a video that they watch, a passage from a book that they read, they find what makes them tick and they strategically use that to get motivated. And you might be too young to realize this, but in the last few years, there's been a movement towards what we call positive psychology. And it's foundational to the entire Outperform the Norm for Student Athletes book. I believe that it should start there. It's reframing the glass half empty to the glass half full and really looking at how can we change our attitudes and our thoughts from what we're trying to avoid or what we fear to what we should focus on and what we want. It's a huge thing. But when it comes to motivation, in the 15 plus years that I've worked with elite performers, there is a motivational tactic that every single person uses that almost no one talks about. And it's not positive psychology. It's actually when someone has told you that you can't do something and you want to prove them wrong. Or some failure or something negative that has actually happened in your life that you take that and you use it as fuel for your motivational fire. And again, it doesn't jive with the kind of positive psychology and things like that, which is part of the reason that nobody talks about it. But if you want exhibit A of this, I would encourage you, I'll try and include a link and possibly the video below this video, but Michael Jordan's Hall of Fame speech. And of course, Jordan played, back in the day, none of you guys actually saw him play, but most successful basketball player of all time, greatest player of all time. And his Hall of Fame speech, go ahead and Google it or look it up on YouTube, but basically start to finish, all he talks about is in high school, he talks about the coach that cut him. He talks about somebody that doubted him in college. He talks about somebody that doubted him, told him he couldn't do something in the NBA. And of course, this is kind of one end of the extreme side of it, but he basically used that as fuel for his motivational fire all the way through his career. It was basically his driving force was, I'm going to prove these people wrong. And I don't necessarily think you should be looking at these things 24/7, but the fact of the matter is it obviously worked for him, and it was something that he used to be able to strategically create that motivation when he needed it most. And I would encourage you to do the same because, again, in my 15 plus years of working with elite performers, I've never once met someone that can't point to at least one thing that's happened in their life, whether they've been, it can be fired from a job, or it can be a teammate or an opponent or somebody telling you, you know what, you're not good enough, you're not tall enough, you're not fast enough, you're not strong enough, you're just not good enough to be able to do this, or you can't do that, or you're not going to be able to make this happen. And you take that negative and you turn it and you use it as fuel again for that motivational fire. I think in like my own example, when I signed up for my first Ironman triathlon, I'd never completed a triathlon before, and I wasn't a swimmer growing up. And if you don't know, an Ironman swim is 2.4 miles. And at the time, I could barely swim when I first signed up. And I'll never forget, I had a client of mine that I was working with at the time that was a former collegiate swimmer. And she just said, well, what's your time for 500 meters? Because she was just wondering where I was at with swimming. And I said, well, I actually can't swim 500 meters. And I remember she laughed in my face. And she said, what are you doing? How can you sign up for Ironman and think that you're going to be able to swim 2.4 miles when you can't even swim 500 meters? And I just said, okay, all right, I'm going to show you. I'm going to get you. I'm going to prove you wrong. And every single time I didn't feel like doing something, I didn't feel motivated to get in the pool or to get in the lake, I thought of that. And I used it strategically as motivation. And sure enough, the rest is history. I got through it just fine. And usually that's what happens with outperformers. So again, I don't think that you should redirect because you are looking at negatives when we talk about something like this that's happened in your life. rather than kind of the positive side of things and what you should focus on reframing and glass half empty to glass half full. But I would encourage you, think of just one time in your life, whether it's someone that told you that you couldn't do something or something that happened to you where, you know what, you just didn't cut it or you weren't good enough, and you can strategically use that as motivation to say, you know what, I'm going to prove you wrong. Like, I'm going to get you, or I'm going to make this right, or I'm going to do this, or I'm going to show you. All outperformers do that. And again, it's not something that you typically read in motivational books, but it is something that every single person uses, me included. And I would highly encourage you to think of that when you don't feel like doing something and when you really need something to kind of get you going, make you tick, and to kind of get you motivated. So use that for motivation, put it to very good use, but don't focus on it all the time. Keep outperforming, and thanks for being here. Catch up with you on the next one.